You look at some of these businesses and they think they want to sell and say, hey, you got to grow this thing. And they say, well, I really don't know how to grow it. And oftentimes the best way to grow it is through acquisitions. And so I'll meet with clients and they're thinking that they should exit, whereas we ultimately wind up with a plan to say, why don't we make a couple of acquisitions? Because you're going to make this a bigger, better, faster, stronger business, and it's going to be worth more. And one of the things, especially, and even on smaller companies, people don't realize that, organic growth is you feel good about yourself, it's romantic, but the fastest way to grow your business is through acquisition.
Welcome to Sterling Insights, Stand Out and Supercharge Your Assets, the go-to podcast for financial advisors aiming to grow their assets under management, stand out in a crowded market, and retain assets nearly forever. Are you advising high net worth clients who own appreciated capital assets? Do you want to help them sell without losing a quarter, a third, or even more of their hard-earned profits to capital gains taxes? Then this podcast is tailored for you. Each episode brings you the latest strategies and expert advice from leading financial advisors, seasoned attorneys, and experienced CPAs. Learn how to maximize your clients' wealth, minimize their taxes, and supercharge your advisory practice with actionable insights. Join us on Sterling Insights, Stand Out and Supercharge Your Assets, where you'll gain the knowledge and tools to set yourself apart and achieve unparalleled success in wealth management. Subscribe now and empower your practice for a brighter, more prosperous future. Welcome to another episode of Sterling Insights, Stand Out and Supercharge Your Assets. I am your host, Roger Silk, and with us today is Richard Parker. Richard is a leading expert in buying and selling businesses. His book, How to Buy a Good Business at a Great Price, has sold over 100,000 copies in over 80 countries. Richard has personally acquired 13 businesses, ranging in price from $50,000 all the way up to $200 million. Richard has partnered with Ray Dalio, who is one of the richest people in the world and one of the most successful investors ever, mentoring his son in business acquisitions. He's been featured in Forbes, the New York Times, Entrepreneur, and other places. Richard, we are very pleased to have you with us.
Thank you, Roger. I appreciate you having me.
Why don't we just talk a little bit about your program? You can explain a little bit about what it is, and we can take it from there.
Sure. I mean, I don't want to sound like an infomercial, but the program, it came out of a very bad deal. When I say a very bad deal, a deal that could have gone very bad for myself, was a business that I was looking at a number of years ago. And the further I dug, the more I realized that I couldn't figure out parts of the business, and I realized that I would never be able to figure it out. It was like a big plate of spaghetti. It was multiple entities, and there was no fraud going on, but companies, a lot of commingling. There was one of the companies was short of cash, so they moved cash from one company into the other, didn't record it properly, paid people from one company, should have been paid from another. It was just, like I said, a plate of spaghetti, and ultimately could never get to the true number related to the business. And I decided to back out of the transaction. It wasn't a huge deal, a little over $1 million. I remember thinking to myself, the average person would have bought that business. It was only because I had been involved in so many transactions, looked at so many businesses, that I was able to figure out that I would never be able to figure it out. And that really started me down a path. I became very intrigued with, what does the average person do who wants to buy a business, who typically has no experience at it. It's, most of them are first timers, but what do they do? What resources are available? What good knowledge is available? What believable information is available? And the more I dug, the more I realized that there really wasn't a whole lot of helpful information, proven strategies written by people with a track record, practical information that people could put to use. A lot of delusional programs expressing you go buy these phenomenal businesses for no money down and all these wonderful things. And I really just wanted to memorialize all the years and all the deals that I put together, with the hope, but I never had any aspiration of turning it into a business. It's stunning to me that, these years later, sold 100,000 copies of this and helped tens of thousands of people, but really wanted to position away. Here's what you need to know. Here's what you need to do. And here's how to do it. And it's called How to Buy a Good Business at a Great Price. It's been phenomenally successful. We have some wonderful success stories of people, and it's something I'm very proud of because we've really been able to change the lives of a lot of people who've put what we teach and our words to use in the real world and wound up with a really terrific outcome.
So your business today is, how would you describe it?
Well, we always have the publishing business. The majority of what I do is related to M&A work, representing business owners selling their businesses and more in the lower market investment banking. I did sell side representation for many years. And as I mentioned, the guide continues to sell. It's online. We've written so many articles over the year and been interviewed so many times that we have this tremendous amount of content that's out on the internet. And people, anybody who's interested in buying a business and is looking for a legitimate voice, if you will, or someone who's going to help them in a good way, ultimately finds us.
Now, Richard, are you primarily on the sell side at
Yes.
representing owners
Yeah.
selling?
Yeah, I
So,
represent a lot of owners today. I did many years of buy-side representation after my work with the Dalio family office in the investment business. When I decided to get back into the M&A world, more on the sell side, handle a few engagements during the course of the year. The buy side is really related to the course where I'm always available, no matter what I'm doing. I'll always stop what I'm doing when a prospective buyer who's purchased our material has a question related to process that they're going through, and continue to provide that guidance.
so I think you said lower middle market. Is that what you
Yes,
said?
lower market.
And how do you define that?
I wish I could because I don't think anybody can. Effectively, you hear lower market, lower middle market, except what I define the lower middle market for the area where I like to play as a buyer of businesses myself and a representative of sellers or buyers. And those are typically businesses that'll go up to about $10 million of EBITDA. The lower market to me is between above business brokerage, so above Main Street USA, and below the very large investment banking firms. That to me defines more of the lower market, typically owner operated businesses, which fits very well because those are typically the businesses that the average individual looks to buy as well. So it's an area and a space that I'm very familiar with.
Right. And so as you go to, so you said up to 10 million in EBITDA, and what would be the lower end of that ballpark?
Never below a million. The sweet
Okay.
spot is probably 2.5 to 7.5.
Uh-huh. Okay. And I mean, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but my experience is that, especially towards the lower end of that range, EBITDA, owner earnings, that there's sort of like a mushy area of what's what are we really selling here?
Yes, you are 100% correct. And it is, I know when you say you don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but the reality is to investigate that number effectively, if you're a buyer, you got to go down the rabbit hole.
Right, right, right. I know. I just
Yeah, I mean, it's position, and there's a big disconnect or misunderstanding. You get these businesses and an individual looks at it and they get a number and they say, well, the cash flow is this, or the EBITDA is this, or the adjusted earnings of this, or the owner benefit, or the seller's discretionary earnings. And typically they could all mean different things or the same thing. And the first thing is cash flow, in its technical term, cash flow is not profit. Here's the whole goal, because it's a great point, Roger. The idea in these owner operated businesses in the lower market, you're trying to come up with a number for what the new owner is going to have available to pay themselves a salary, service the debt, and grow the business.
so that's I'm really glad you mentioned that because what you're saying is that in this market, you're selling mostly to a new owner operator.
Yes.
Okay.
So we have, on the sell side, we'll sell to a lot of PE firms, but in the lower market, and I want to talk to more of the people that, typically, I believe, related to your audience that may be looking to buy a business as an individual versus being an institutional buyer like a private equity firm or a family office. The premise is done on an owner operated basis.
Let's
And
talk about that for a minute, Richard, because I get totally what that means. Is that means, well, to be uncharitable about it, you're buying a job.
yeah, and you know what? I've heard that. I recognize that thought process. My counter argument to that is for the individual, wherever they are in life. I don't see anything wrong with buying a job if you buy the right job. And when I say buying a job, meaning a lower market business where, number one, you have no ceiling on your earnings. Yes, if you're buying a Subway in a strip mall in Main Street, USA, there's only so much you can earn. But
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you're
yeah,
buying
sure. No, I don't mean it necessarily as a criticism, but as a qualifier.
as a qualifier, yes. And so, but the idea is if you're compared to working for someone, if you are, in theory, as many people say, and I get it, buying a job, but this job gives you an opportunity that no other job gives you.
What is the sort of sweet spot of your buyers in terms of demographics?
My buyers are typically going to buy a business under $5 million dollars who purchase our course. They're going to buy a business under $5 million dollars. They come from all walks of life. It's fascinating to me. You get a lot of individuals who've been mid-level managers or have worked for someone. They've gained a little bit of experience, sometimes enough to be dangerous, other times to recognize that they're not going to ever graduate within their current environment commensurate with what they believe their skills or their value is. The demographics are actually more than, let's say, age, gender, and where they live. These are individuals who want to change their life. They're individuals who want to control their own destiny. They're individuals that want to build wealth. They want to have an element of joy in the work that they do and believe that can be derived from business ownership because it can. And they want to be in a position where if they build value, they want to be rewarded for it. Because the beauty of a business, when you build value for every businesses sell at a multiple of what we were talking about earlier, adjusted earnings or what have you. So for every, assuming it sells at a 5 times multiple, for every dollar of value you build, you get $5 back when the time comes to sell. So they have these individual, they're more individual philosophical demographics of that they have, and very often a burning desire to be an entrepreneur. And buying a business is, I'll make the argument all day long, a better way to go than starting a business because of what you take over. You do it right, you get the check, you get the keys on Monday, you take a paycheck on Friday. So it gives them a platform to get into a business where someone else has already gone through the learning curve. But they have these really core desires to be an entrepreneur.
So would that person typically be somebody who wasn't previously an entrepreneur, was previously somebody in a, say, a corporate job or something like that?
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. I mean, the majority of people who buy businesses at the lower market are first-time buyers.
And you said 5 million is the purchase price. So we're talking,
Yeah.
if you say EBITDA or whatever that cash flow number is, what are the multiples tend to be in the space that you work in?
The lower market usually has the lower multiples. People get polluted with reading some of these multiples on Wall Street. There's no application to the lower end. A business, it really depends upon the fundamentals in the business. If you start getting below, a $500,000 in earnings, I mean, the multiples stay pretty low, like 1 to 3 times. But the businesses that are well run, they have reasonable processes and procedures in place. The business is sustainable, potentially scalable, and no red flags, which are very prevalent in a lot of small businesses, like the owner is the business, where there's a high degree of customer concentration. Those are problems that you see far more at the lower end than you do at the higher end. But businesses that are void of those major issues, I mean, those are really significant issues, they'll sell at decent multiples. I mean, up to, sometimes they'll go up to about 5 times, business that's got about $1 million of adjusted earnings or seller discretionary earnings or owner benefited, we call them. It could be in a 5 times multiple. You have other businesses or industries that get hot, like home services right now are very, very hot. HVAC companies, roofing companies, plumbing, electrical, because of shortage of tradespeople. And we're seeing those businesses where on the intermediary side that have $3, $5 million of EBITDA are selling for 7, 8, 10 times more than double digits. But in the lower market, I like to see for the individual buyer, there's generally these price breaks where you see businesses that are earning less than a $500,000, those that are $500,000 to $1 million and $1 million and up will go like 1 to 3, 2 to 4, 3 to 5 times in those three separate categories.
Mhm. The purchaser, it sounds like most of the time, has to be willing and able to step in and what? Be the CEO, the COO, CFO, all those things rolled into one.
Yeah, it's a great question because I see people go off the reservation with that question or that plan. If you're buying a smaller business, If your goal is to ultimately not run that business on a day-to-day basis and bring in a manager, that's a great plan. I've done it repeatedly. But you've got to learn the business first. You can't bring in management if you have no idea how to run that business. So you've got to get in, and especially for first timers who don't have any operational experience, you need to get in, you need to roll up your sleeves, you need to get your fingernails dirty and understand how to operate a business. And then if you want to sell a absentee type owner business, that's great. Those are on their own command higher multiples, but you have to be able to know what type of manager you should be bringing into place. You can't determine that in a business where you have no experience and no operational involvement. You have to first get immersed and get involved, and then you could bring in someone. So I really encourage people, especially first timers, learn to be an operator.
So your sellers, if I understood you right, your sellers those are a
Yes.
higher level. So,
Yes.
okay, is there, I mean, obviously every big business started off as a smaller business.
Yes. Correct.
So somebody who steps into either starts it or steps in, maybe we're doing $1 million of owner earnings or whatever that number
Yeah.
is,
The squish. I like that. You call it what? The mushy number. Right.
because virtually every small business, that's the case.
Pretty much. Yes.
But do you, or is there people out there who work with, say, that founder to go from, okay, I am the business to now you need to bring in maybe a COO or a CFO or both or something like that. So you can take that business where you then move it up the food chain so that you expand the pool of buyers, you could expand it to PE and strategics. Is that something where you get involved?
Absolutely. And it's so important because most businesses, we keep hearing today about this silver tsunami of all these businesses, these baby boomers, and all, the $1 trillion exchange, they call it. And it's not happening. I mean, it's
I've
really
read,
not happening. I've
maybe,
been reading about it forever, for as long as I can remember reading about it. You know what I mean? Whenever I hear someone say that, I try to bring them back to reality, saying the vast majority of businesses in the lower market, they don't sell. They're not ready to be sold. No one wants to buy them. They're garbage. Like you look on these business for sale listings, 75% of those businesses will never sell. And there's a reason why they don't sell. Because typically there's no buyer. There's no buyer because they're garbage businesses. They're garbage businesses because they can't transition to a new owner because the owner is the business or what have you. So when I work with buyers on both sides, tell them the time to start preparing your business for sale is like day one when you own it. You want to run your business like you have to sell it. And that means having certain things in place. For example, what keeps you up at night about a business? Roger, let's say you own a commercial cleaning company. Well, what keeps you up at night about the business? And the reality, every owner has something that keeps them up at night about the business. Well, you'd say to me, well, it's the, recruiting, training and retaining of employees. I have too much turnover. Well, if that's a problem in your business and you as the owner, you could rest assured whatever you have as a problem in the business is going to be magnified to the power of 10 in the eyes of a buyer because they have no experience with it. You live with it, you work around it. But in the eyes of a buyer, what you believe is an incident, they believe is a catastrophe. Solving for those type of things not only makes your business more sellable in the future, but it makes it a better business today. And the only way you're going to scale it is by having a rock solid foundation, mitigating these challenges and issues and problems so that the business could run on its own without you there overseeing it constantly. And you can bring in a second level of management. I had a client, he used to take 120 days vacation a year. He called in rarely. At one point, he went 3.5 months without calling in. He took several years off, but he put the people into place. And so you want to grow your business and think about it, not only from the eyes of a buyer, but when you put in the right processes, procedures, and systems into place, the business is a better business today. It's like, what happens if you get hit with a Pepsi truck tomorrow, Roger, and if you're running a business? If you say my business goes out of business in a week, well, you haven't built a good business.
right. Of the people who buy a business, the owner operators who buy a business, do you have any feel for how many of them are able to transition that business to where they do have something that they can sell so that they're not just looking to get back out what they what they paid for it because they've moved it to a higher level?
I can only speak for our clients. And we have a very high success rate of people who actually complete the process and complete a purchase. When done right, and it's the owner operator, because we preach and teach about making sure the business is right for the individual, matching your core skill set. We've had like a couple over the years, maybe two out of tens of thousands that have not been able to exit the business. And
Wow.
the average business, by the way, just some stats for some of your listeners, small business, the average turn is 5 years.
You mean average that it
Ownership
stays
period.
really?
Ownership period. Yeah, 5 years.
And what happens at the end of 5 years? It goes out of
Well,
business?
sometimes they go out of business, other times they get sold. The
Uh-huh.
average businesses turn over an average of every 5 years. I would
So,
have thought originally it was much less than that because you hear people owning businesses for decades, but that's actually the number.
yeah, I am surprised by that. Do the businesses at this lower end of the market follow the standard, it takes a while to get going, and they have growth and they have maturity, and then they kind of peter out?
Absolutely. The trajectory is like this. In businesses, I call it the three G's of the hill, right? At the bottom, you have garbage. So that means a new business, a startup, which you don't know what it's going to turn into because everything's new. So all sounds wonderful, but you have no clue. As you go up and build a business, it becomes a good business, meaning generating revenue, profit, ample profit you're able to take out of the business, lead a nice lifestyle, etc., and build it into a great business. After a great business, the only way is down. And so, because that's the life cycle of every business. And so you want to buy the business in that period where it's good. That's what I called how to buy a good business at a great price. You don't want to buy garbage. You don't want to buy a distressed business because that's awful. That might have been good, it might have been great, but it's heading towards garbage. So you want to buy a good business, and then you want to buy it, build it, and sell it before that normal summit of great, because you always want to sell a business on its way up. I had a conversation with a group of doctors, but they had almost a self-managed big clinic. They're making lots and lots of money. And they were talking about buying a business or selling a business. And one of them said to me, is it true the best time we sell it is like as soon as past when we believe it hits its peak and it's starting to get on the way down? I said, no, no. You want to sell it before that. You're going to leave some crumbs on the table. There's no doubt. But you want to sell it on its way up. Always an upward swing.
So probably sooner than most people think.
Yes.
Would it make sense that if a business owner is running a business and one day the idea comes to him, maybe it's time to sell?
It's probably already past the time to sell. So you want to start. I can't impart enough how important this next statement is, which is you got to run your business like you want to sell it tomorrow. And so the minute, if you buy a business, you don't want to start thinking about selling it. You want to run it like you have to sell it. Initiatives, policies, procedures, people, things that you should be putting in place should be done immediately, because you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Meaning, if you have two customers that represent 60% of your business, and you have that in a lot of distribution business or B2B businesses, to correct for that could take years. And that's going to cause an enormous red flag. You either have to sell it to a direct competitor, or you're going to sell it to someone and you're going to force a massive performance clause in the purchase price. So, the three bumper stickers I always tell sellers, the one is run it like you have to sell it, which we talked about. The second one we mentioned briefly, which is whatever keeps you up at night about the business is going to keep the buyer up at night times 10. And the third part is what happens if you evaporate tomorrow? You get hit by a Pepsi truck, you disappear off the planet. What happens to the business? If the business is going to fold or go out of business, you don't have much of a business.
And how many, like, what fraction of the smaller businesses would you say that's the case? You don't really have something here that's sellable.
An
You've got
enormous amount.
like 80%.
That's, I'm going to use the stats related to the business for sale websites, which keep the majority of small businesses that are put on the market for sale go onto those public online databases for sale. And the numbers within those databases is 66 to 75% of those businesses never sell.
And that's basically because there's no business there to sell.
There's no business still there to sell.
Uh-huh. Wow. The program, How to Buy a Good Business at a Great Price, is how do people find it if they're interested in it?
Very easy. Go to richardparker.com. I built that whole
richardparker.com.
richardparker.com. I built that whole website for tools and resources for people. It's not a sales pitch. We have tons and tons of free videos, free educational videos, I think like 30, 40 hours of educational videos, free. All the podcasts that I've been on in the last 8, 10 months can be rotating. I've been on about 80 of them, hundreds of articles. You could really get informed. It's a good place to get lost because if you have any entrepreneurial blood running through your veins, you really owe it to yourself to at least investigate what's this all about and do get some good learning under your belt and see what's involved. And then you could decide, I mean, one way or the other, what you want to do. But for people that are intellectually or entrepreneurially creative, it's a great place to get a lot of good information.
Yeah. On the sell side, what are your customers or clients like on the sell side?
You're talking as far as demographic is concerned?
Yeah, like businesses, kind of, again, that's not quite the lower market. That's like a little bit,
Yes.
yeah.
The majority of them, I would say I spend from 3 to 12 months working with them before we even take the business to market because they have, even at that, they may have less of those things that we talked about earlier, but very often they still have some of those things. And so we do a real good analysis of what's in place with the business. We want to make the business easy for someone to buy. And when I say easy for someone to buy, I don't mean price and terms. I mean that they could recognize that this is a rock solid good business that will be stable after they take it over and has a footprint to grow. And so getting those things in place, whether it be initiatives, policies, procedures, people, that's one real, they certainly have that in common. So it takes a little bit of time to get that in place. They're still very often family run businesses. They have, for the most part, brought in some management, but maybe they haven't given that management the latitude to do their thing. And so it's a matter of having them let go a little bit and making sure if they believe it's the right people, let them do their thing and being able to step away a little bit and also getting a good handle on some of their metrics and KPIs so that they're able to provide good data sets to prospective buyers. And they're all over as far as industries. The only thing I don't do is healthcare just because there's very healthcare, you either have these real low end businesses or billion-dollar corporations. As much as I love healthcare and my late partner and I invested in healthcare, I don't do any work in the healthcare sector because there's just nothing that fits in my swim lane for the most part.
I think you said earlier that these on the sell side, that's where nothing less than 1 million and up to about 10 million in cash
Correct.
flow or whatever we're calling that number.
Yeah, EBITDA. Sometimes it's adjusted earnings, we call it,
Yeah.
but it's really an EBITDA number. And EBITDA
Uh,
is for your listeners who aren't familiar, I'm sure you are, EBITDA is a managed debt-free business.
right. Do people, if they have a business to sell, they engage you like an investment banker?
Yes,
So does that mean that your fee is contingent on you selling the business for them?
correct. If I don't do my job, I don't get paid. And oftentimes, by the way, where there's sort of like this overlap, which becomes very interesting for me anyways, is you look at some of these businesses and they think they want to sell and say, hey, you got to grow this thing. And they say, well, I really don't know how to grow it. And oftentimes the best way to grow it is through acquisitions. And so I'll meet with clients and they're thinking that they should exit, whereas we ultimately wind up with a plan to say, why don't we make a couple of acquisitions? Because you're going to make this a bigger, better, faster, stronger business, and it's going to be worth more. And one of the things, especially, and even in smaller companies, people don't realize that, organic growth is you feel good about yourself. It's romantic, but the fastest way to grow your business is through acquisition.
Right. Richard, unfortunately, we're about out of time here. I know that you have that giant amount of information on your website. Is there some particular thing that you like our audience to hear that we haven't talked about yet?
I really think for those individuals that are business owners, pay real attention to your business because it's very easy to go on cruise control and to think you got a good business. And instead of, I see it over and over again where people just take too much money out of their business. Live a little more humbly. As the business grows, you don't have to keep stripping money out of the business. Put the money back into business for good marketing initiatives, good people, because every dollar value you build is going to bring a multiple of it when the time comes to sell. So don't get intoxicated. You've worked hard, I get it. You want to reap the rewards of it, but make it, spend your money, extract your money wisely. And if you can live a little tighter, it's better off, and, fund the business for good growth. And on the individual side, entrepreneur business ownership is doable by anybody. And so I implore people, if they have any hopes and dreams or anything along those lines related to, being their own boss, at the very least, learn what's involved and then decide. I mean, I think you owe it to yourself. You don't want to go through this whole career and say, shoot, I should have gone into my own business, because it's not that difficult. I mean, I'm no genius. I've done 14 times. So just, explore and learn what's involved and then decide.
Fantastic. If people want to contact you, what's the best way to do that?
Go to richardparker.com. And if someone wants to contact me directly, on the contact page for the form, and just ask them to send it to me directly, and I'll get it. I'm happy to reply.
So it's richardparker.com. We'll put that in the notes.
Thank you. And I truly appreciate you having me. It's a nice conversation.
Yeah, it is. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Sterling Insights, Stand Out and Supercharge Your Assets, where we provide the info you need from successful leading financial advisors, lawyers, and CPAs. Your hosts, Roger and Catherine Silk, invite you to learn more about Sterling Foundation Management by visiting sterlingfoundations.com.